I think of Poppy.
When I think of Poppy.
When I think of Poppy.
I think of Poppy.
When 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 I think of Poppy.
I see the fruits of the Spirit. I think how well Poppy modeled the greatest commandment, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself.
He loved to sing, and he was a prime example of a godly man. I know without a shadow of doubt that he will be singing again in heaven, one of his favorite songs that he'd like to lead our church with. Floods of joy in my soul like to see billows roll, since Jesus came into my heart.
Mom and Dad did daily devotions around this kitchen table every morning. Mom would pick the devotion and Dad would pick the song to sing, and together they would sing the songs. It was so nice hearing them and seeing them do this, and quite an inspiration to me.
Trusting as the moments fly, trusting as the days go by, trusting him whate'er befall.
When I think of Poppy, I see his toes sticking out of his socks. Then I see him in his Sunday best with his hair slicked over, ready to go to church early to sing with the choir. I'll see you at church.
I think of someone who loved and feared the Lord.
As I got to know Poppy and his family, I was blown away by the fact how much they were all drawn to God. It took a while, but this grew on me. And eventually I was able to surrender my life to God.
So I'm sure right now he's up there in heaven in his recliner looking down upon us, giving us a smile. As long as we all keep the faith in the Lord, and follow the Lord, we'll all eventually see them again and get to go fishing in the heavenly ponds and catch some golden bass.
When I think of Poppy, I think of a man whose faith was in Jesus Christ, a man who was content, always happy, and wanted you to share in that happiness.
I also think of a man who I personally have never heard him say anything bad or negative about any person.
Everyone in the Simkins clan seems to have a silly nickname that was bestowed upon them at some point. Some of them have to do with farm animals, others farm equipment, and some of them that have a little bit more of a mysterious origin. In my case, my given name is Lauren Simkins, but you would never hear that around the Simkins clan. So at some point, Poppy decided to call me Missy, which I think was a lot more fun for him to be able to yell out from wherever he was when we visited the farm and say, "Hey, Missy!"
Dad and I had the same nickname for each other. I called him Gumby, and he called me Gumby right back.
He was Poppy to his children, Tip to his wife, Gumby to his daughter, Ferd to many, and Frog9 to me. But to most of his pinochle partners, he was Big 9.
Loved his pinochle. Whether it be accidentally betting too much on the hand he shouldn't have and going into the hole, or accidentally nining people when he shouldn't have. Never forget that's where I'd learned that lesson from. Don't ever nine anybody because of Big 9.
If you ever saw Poppy's hand, you would know exactly what I mean. Not a single card was in order.
My pinochle was an adventure, and if you're on Poppy's partner, it was definitely an adventure.
Poppy was great at taking the bid, but not always the best at making the bid. When he'd pull it out by the narrowest of margins, many times it was due to the lucky find of an extra 4 to 6 meld in his hand, hidden due to his lack of organization skills.
I think of a pro pinochle player.
I remember numerous pinochle games around this table with family members.
When it was Poppy's deal, you know it was coming. One bid, no passies. Play them like you got them.
Poppy had a way of recognizing something's worth, even when no one else did. For example, the amount of 9s in his hands and how high his bids were in pinochle. Playing with him, you'd either win by a mile or you would lose in the hole.
When I think of Poppy, I think about memories on the farm together.
I remember all the visits to the farm over the years and just sitting around that round table off the kitchen and how Poppy would kind of look at me and make funny faces or a big grin, and how it would make me laugh and just feel at ease and at home there.
I think of the farm, but most importantly, I think of time.
Poppy always gave all of us grandchildren his time, whether he was half asleep in the chair or tinkering with something on the farm. He always made sure to give us his time.
His 89-year-old body with a bad shoulder, a bad back, a bad ankle, and a bad knee would somehow climb the 6 tall stairs to the combine cab, and he'd sit in this very uncomfortable seat for hours, and we would just ride around the fields.
But when I think of Poppy, I think of a man who was generous. Yeah, he might not have taken us out to eat a lot of times. He might not have gotten a lot of gifts. But whatever Poppy had was ours. It didn't matter if you borrowed his truck. It didn't matter if you got his four-wheeler dirty. It didn't matter if the truck came back empty. You could go right in here and pull out anything you wanted for Poppy. Hunting gear, fishing gear, chainsaws. Whatever Poppy had was ours. Poppy was so generous, and he just wanted to share in that with us.
Anytime going to the farm and walking into the house, and there Poppy is in his spot, in his chair, watching some kind of sport.
Just when you thought he was asleep in his chair, he would get up and tell you the score of the Eagles game, the Phillies game, tell you which team won, which team lost, and tell you his thoughts of the game.
I raced out to the barn and he tied the calf's legs and asked me to pull her out. Wow, what an experience for a born-raised city girl. I called that calf Bright Eyes and would always give her an extra scoop of feed when Poppy wasn't looking.
Whether it be baling hay, plowing fields, or milking cows, you know that Poppy would never give up and never stop working.
He taught me you work until the job is done and you don't take any shortcuts.
When I think of my dad, I think of a hardworking farmer. He milked cows for nearly 50 years, twice a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year.
It was in those fields where I first learned about Poppy's work ethic. We would bale hay all day long, barely taking any breaks.
He took Andrew and I with him to bale some straw for a neighbor, and we were maybe 12 years old at the time, so he decided to put us on the wagon and stack the bales. The only problem was Poppy's baler didn't have a ramp that would push the bales up to you slowly and gently. His had a thrower, so at every 10 seconds there'd be a 40-pound bale hurtling our way. For some reason, none of us thought this was a bad idea.
11 years ago, Char and I were entrusted with purchasing the family farm and carrying on the farming tradition for another generation. Dad was always interested in what was going on at the farm and what was being planted, and he loved watching things happen. During planting season, Dad would ask if he could help in some way, and I would say, sure, you can go out and cut Hara for a while.
And he would come out and find me, and I would get him in the tractor and watch him go around a time or two, and then I would have to leave the farm just to avoid the stress level of him hitting something or running something over.
But he never did.
I think of him playing puzzles and drinking tea.
When I think of Poppy, I hear his voice singing to the Lord. I hear the gravel under the truck tires as we hope the brakes work down the steep bank to the water.
He's always full of adventures. Always fun to be around. You can learn a lot from Poppy. I sure did.
When I think of Poppy, I think of an outdoorsman.
Fishing, going to the farm, exploring, him teaching us new things.
Even puzzles were an adventure, and he would celebrate every piece that got put in. Whether he found it, you found it, it didn't matter. It was like you scored the winning touchdown at the Super Bowl.
He really liked to read a lot. He liked to be out in nature. Of course, he liked playing pinochle and hunting and just being a real hands-on active gamer.
My dad playing checkers with Josh when Josh was 4. He made the grandchildren earn their wins. And of course, he beat Josh on a triple jump when Josh was 4 years old.
It started on the checkerboard. We would play for hours on end. After many losses, I would learn not to rush to score the quick jump, but to sit back and plan out how to line up the double and triple jumps.
When we were young, playing checkers was an adventure with Poppy.
Poppy had the uncanny ability of letting the little things go. Take, for example, the sides and tailgates of Poppy's pickup trucks. You would think he was playing bumper cars or was in a demolition derby. There were scratches, dents, dings, broken taillights everywhere you looked.
I think of when he used to drive me in his truck. We would swerve off the road in the middle of the night, into oncoming traffic, back on the road, into the grass. I said, Poppy, what are you doing? And he goes, see that buck over there?
And out of the corner of my eye, I see Poppy pull up an imaginary gun and go, kapow! And I thought I was going to have a heart attack. And I said, Poppy, what the heck is wrong with you? And he said, there was a deer down there, and I got him.
Poppy loved attending my sporting events over the years, and I cherished seeing him up in the stands. We had many long talks about the Phillies, Eagles, and Sixers, and of course about our separate fishing trips.
He was a good man. Loved his family, loved his grandchildren. Was always there to support him, whether it be their sporting events.
Always being at a lot of my games, basketball, football, in high school, and just there to support myself and my brothers, my cousins, everybody.
When I think of Poppy, I think of someone who was a family man.
How kind he was, that he never said a bad word about anyone, that he was very humble. He would make do with any situation. He was simple and plain and did not need bells and whistles to be very happy and very content with the life.
Poppy was always interested in what we were up to. Even though he didn't hear half of what you said, he would still enjoy listening. I'll never forget the ohs and yes sprinkled throughout all of our conversations.
I think of when I was about 23 years old and he finally took the training wheels off my bike. While traumatic at the time, it always was something that we would laugh about, and that's just how he lived his life and the way we should too, with the training wheels off and living life to the fullest.
I think of a man who, with Grammy, was at any birthday party, any kind of party occasion, grandkid, kid, great-grandchild, he was there.
We hobble out to the rusty old pickup truck, throw in the fishing gear and creak open those big doors. I move some tools out of the way to find a seat, and we start down the hazy road as the morning fog lifts. I crank down the windows, and the fresh cold morning air jolts me awake. Poppy is singing a hymn to pass the time on the drive.
We went fishing, him and I, in Camp Grice, which you like to call Mickles. And we were getting thrown out of the lake when I was reeling in this here fish. And Poppy was yelling at the ranger as I was bringing it in, and he smacked it over the head with with an oar and knocked it out. And we ended up keeping it. And for 6 months, he kept it a secret that he had gotten it framed and stuffed for me. And he gave it to me on my birthday.
When I was maybe 10 years old, just the two of us threw his old green canoe into the back of his pickup truck and went down to the neighbor's property and went fishing on that pond, and he taught me how to catch my first bass. And after that, he was so happy for me, just nothing but pure joy, even childlike happiness, and I was so appreciative of that time that we had together.
He worked hard and he played hard. He loved the outdoors and he loved to laugh.
He's sitting on the front porch, 90 years old, still planting flowers.
Dad loved tending his flower beds, and even up until the past year or so, you could see him out on his hands and knees, hoeing with his broken down hoe.
He never gave up. He never wanted to stop working.
Dad grabbed a pickaxe and was busting up rocky ground for 4 hours. That was the most difficult job he could have chosen. He was probably 20 years older than the next youngest guy and outworked all of us, which amazed everyone. I guess he thought he needed to earn those fishing credits. The rest of the weekend involved a lot of play, especially fishing, and by the end of the weekend, it seemed like Dad was best friends with just about everyone there.
That's what he means by hard workers. If you want to think of anything being a hard worker, you think of Poppy.
He was also a prankster. One day, he put a dead animal on me while I was sleeping, and he woke me up and I screamed bloody murder.
I remember taking Dad on some of our family trips to Vermont. He would get up bright and early to go fishing out on Lake Bomoseen before the rest of us were up tearing up the water skiing. We played some rowdy games of Pictionary at night, And we also sat around the campfire telling stories. Dad telling some maybe not quite so appropriate jokes to the grandsons.
I think of the time when Poppy lost the fishing motor on the boat and never replaced it. A true Simkins quality.
He's someone that liked to play pranks and practical jokes and just loved a good laugh. And loved a good laugh on April Fool's Day.
Knock, knock. Who's there? Interrupting shoot. Interrupting.
Another occasion was when my two sons were playing Legos on the floor on the porch area of the farmhouse. He snuck around the corner with a chicken hawk mask and claws and red long underwear, and he nearly scared them half to death.
Especially, I'll never forget the times when he was umpiring my little leagues. And, or the times when he would be a bus driver for our Pittsburgh school, and how many mailboxes he accidentally hit or ran over.
Poppy's patience really shined through because he had a propensity of getting snagged. And no, not on a tree branch. I mean, Poppy himself got snagged. In the shirt, or hand, or ear, and it was usually by Metis. Poppy showed great patience in not tossing Metis overboard.
When he took us grandchildren to fish and we accidentally hooked him in the hand, he never got mad. He never gave up.
He would show just how tough he was by continuing to fish with the lure stuck in his hand until the bite dried up. He would wait until we got all the way home until Grammy could pull the hook out.
He babysat my kids when they were little, and their diapers might be soaked, but he gave them 100% attention to them, playing with them and reading books to them.
My dad would read to my kids when they were younger, and his favorite book was Three Billy Goats Gruff.
I think of a guy who wore many hats. Farmer, mailman, bus driver, hunter, fisherman, softball pitcher, singer, guitar player, pinochle player, dad, granddad, great-granddad, practical joker.
Taking a step back and evaluating his pinochle game, you find it coincides with Poppy's outlook on life. Organization? Who needs it? Don't sweat the small stuff. Bid on feel. Seek out that new adventure. If you go up, no big deal, life goes on. But at least you got to experience the thrill. No passies. Slow the game down. Don't let life pass you by. Enjoy the time you have and live life to the fullest. Work hard, but play harder.
While I didn't have the benefit of living nearby, the letters he wrote were something I cherished, always making me feel near and dear. He was my friend, and I love him.
He loved us all.
Poppy, we love you, and we can't wait to see you again someday, passed out in the recliner with the TV volume on max.
Last but not least, I think of a man who accepted me and my sister as his own grandchildren and cared for us and loved us like any other grandchild.
And then I could think of about 300 other wonderful characteristics of my dad.
When I think of Poppy.
I think of Poppy.
When I think of Poppy.
I think of Poppy.
When 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 I think of Gumby.
When I think of Poppy, I think of someone who had his priorities straight.
So Poppy, we're all going to miss you.
He was a sweet and simple man and a wonderful father-in-law.
Just want to say, Poppy, we will always miss you. You'll never be forgotten, and you're an absolute legend. And one day we'll all see you again.
He was the best grandfather we ever had.
I think of my role model, my friend, and I think of countless memories over the 37 years I was blessed to spend with him.
And I will miss him dearly, but I know I will see him again one day in heaven.
Poppy showed me that superheroes don't wear spandex. They wear long johns and hunting hats. I will always remember what he stood for: kindness, a joy of life, and love for his family. Through holding on to and continuing what Poppy stood for, he will always be with me, as he always has.
When I think of my dad.
When I think of my dad.
When I think of Dad.
When I think of Poppy, I think of my dad. A man who I loved and will be sorely missed.
Jesus has come for you and me. Jesus is life. Jesus is love. Jesus has come.